Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I hope everything is well and you have a good time in Katowice and good time at the University of Economics in Katowice. And ladies and gentlemen, allow me to invite and introduce our keynote speaker, Professor Witold Chmielarz, from the University of University of Warsaw, maybe, from University of Economics in Katowice. And Professor Witold Chmielarz is a full professor in economy from 26 for the research work on a banking system. His practical experience includes 3 years of computer firms as a designer, project manager and advisor. He also has consulting experience for banks and small and medium enterprises. His major research interests include e-business and project management and information systems design. He has published over 150 papers, articles and books. Invite Professor Chmielarz.
So, thank you very much for this introduction, as I could say, and I think that's important for me to be today with you. So, dear ladies and gentlemen, dear chairman, I'd like to have today some more impressions, I'd like to introduce more problems, I think, than something what will be a lecture. So I could say that the first title of this lecture should be, idea was quite different. If it's possible to have management information system without end user. But I think that it is too much revolutionary, you see, and the end and ultimate title is Quality Assessment Management Information System. Of course, from point of view of the user. As you see, I know Professor PowerPoint, and I use it for every day almost. But here you have maybe something what wouldn't be the, I think, something like regular lectures. So there are, as I say, more impressions, more comments about situation in the market, situation you see in the economy, situation in between, in the fact, the end user or final user and designers. And I think, people, all the people who try to implement a management information system in economy. So of course the main purpose is as follows, so presenting main problems connected quality assessment management informations we are solving, you see. But I think that there are not only conceptual, there are many, I think, many information about my experiences with quality assessment, you see. And it'll be more and still more questions and answers, as you could see here. So, of course, I introduce the problem because it's important, I think. So I try to introduce the place and role of quality management at all, but in a management life cycle, of course, in project management. I try to say something as a new look at project management because we are discussed yesterday with, I don't see him, about some project management problems, but connected rather with women, you see, during our supper, you see. So I try to show it from maybe more serious side, and then I try to show some measures of quality assessment, but not in details, you see, because I think that details are, in this case, are borrowing. So students say me that's borrowing, so the main differences between them, and I think that this point of view of the final user is the best and the most important. Introduction. So some definitions. So because we are at the university, you should know that what does it mean for me, for example, information user, and there's problems with something what's called end user, final user, or something like management information system. So here, individuality, position of group of persons in one organizational unit, fulfilling given them functionalities. So it may be individual, it may be institutional. And individual, of course, it might be outside of organization, maybe customer, and institutional may be inside of organization. Of course, it may be individual. So it may be clerk, member of staff, member of board, etc. So I think that you see the most of the management information systems were made for these rather institutional users. So maybe individual, but inside of the institution. So I think that until we have to do with customer relationship management system, we haven't to do with a real end user sometimes. So for me, something what's e-commerce is a great chance to have direct contact with a real end user. And maybe it's time to make project in different way, you see. For example, starting from this end user and then going to the institutional, maybe personal or individual user, but inside of institution. So first step should be from side of real end user. So of course here you have some questions. The list of the questions may be longer. Are designers of the system taking into account the requirements of end user? Or are end users needed for creators of a system at all? So I said, maybe it says something like informatics without future. Or is it possible to make any information system without analysis of end user requirements? What's the source of such a question? You see, here in Poland, but I think that it isn't only in Poland, we have such a situation in the 90s of the last century that you see we have many so-called ready systems. Maybe they are ready in the sense that there are something like a framework. I say about ERP, MRP number 2, and so on. So maybe they are ready for using, but only in many standard situations, you see. And for each user, final user, it will be individualized. So it will be, you see, as a very good word in English, customized. So a change for individual user with many parameters, of course. Sometimes quantity of the parameters were out of reason, you see, because without any sense 10,000 or something like that for even middle firm or institution or organization, you see. And they were implemented. And after some years, they changed. So for the other systems, still ready to use theoretically. But nobody asked, in the first moment, nobody asked the end user what to do. What's the requirements, you see. So it was a situation that final user were aside somewhere in the back, you see, and nobody asked him about his opinion about this system. So, of course, it was convenient. We have a system, we are selling a system to customer, and that's all. So we are customized, and if you want to have something better, so you should change. You, not system. So user was in secondary position. So first of all was the firm which selling the system. System is important, the final user not. So there are fundamental questions, I think, for project management. So, of course, we have questions for analysis of this problem, as I said. So we can here obtain, for example, 4 steps. The first one, analysis from point of view of theory of IT system project management, what it should be. The second point is analysis from point of view mistakes in the project management, what it is and why, you see. And analysis from point of view of methodology of assessment quality. So from point of view, of course, pragmatism, usefulness, functionality, how to measure it. So I'm not so courage to say something about economical functionality, because there are sitting Professor Dudic, she is the best in this area, I suppose. So I'll be only said about usefulness, pragmatism, and so on. You see, so from functionality point of view for final user. And the fourth one. Analysis from point of view of end user. So automation in the place of support of informatics without the future, as I said previously. So quo vadis informatica? And first point. Firstly, so here you have typical model, waterfall model. You see, you know that. So I don't should even say that here you have this initiation, so analysis, project, programming, test, implementation, exploitation, termination, and so on. So where? Quality assessment is mainly visible in these first three stages. So in initiation, analysis, project, and then I think it depends, of course. I'm typical researcher, so I shouldn't say yes or no. I said every time it depends on, and it's complicated. So it's complicated, and it depends on what kind of situation you have. If you are making something specific information system from the beginning, of course, the first three stages are very important. But if you have something made in a previous time, so you have so-called ready system, you are starting from implementation. But the implementation status is quite different from the situation when we are starting from beginning, you see. And in termination is very important, because you should prove why we are terminating of the current system, you see. Of course, I used this waterfall model only for such a reason that it was convenient for me. Because here is visible one stage after the other, and so on. So I know about different drawbacks of this idea, of course. And I know Agile Manifesto. So in Agile Manifesto, of course, we have in the first place that the user is the most important element of the information system. Element. Okay, so we are here. So we are in the fifth place here in this life cycle. But we are in a project management theory, you see. Of course, we are starting from something obvious. So we know why project falls. We know well how to prevent it. So why do they still fall? Probably you know that, but this history, I think that starting in 80s maybe in 90s of the last century. And here below you have something like a definition, of course, what does it mean, project management, and something what's a main theoretical construction for this concept. So so-called golden triangle. So where you are realizing something like management, like project management, so you are have three basic structure. So first of all, cost of or budget. For secondly, scope or functionality of the system. And the first, time. And you are moving in such a sense, of course, in between these three parameters. So each project is something like a combination of these three parameters. And you are realizing it moving somewhere inside of them, taking into account, first of all, of these three parameters. It's very good and convenient theory, especially for what? For evaluation of the system realization. But on the other place, it was a thing, I don't know, 30 years ago or something like that, you see. And I think that it is now inactual. So I think that we could extend it. So of course we could add, firstly, two different parameters. So first of all, quality. but quality understanding mainly in something like informatics environment as in technical conditions, I think. So firstly it was because of the Six Sigma and such things you see. And the second point, requirements of the end user. So I think that it could change our point of view of project management at all. So I think that it would change our attempt to you see, something like a constructing of a management information system at all. So starting with end user. So such an idea. So I think that parallelly we are changing relations between these parameters. So it will be non-equivalent because in this triangle, of course, you have to do with something what's balanced in between cost, scope, time, and such things. And here in this concept, you have no such things because requirements of the end user is more important than the rest. So, of course, we have something like a conscience that something like management information system, it is not only idea. It's that's in something like economical environment, and we have to do each time with something what's a generally dynamic environment. So, of course, first of all, economic conditions, because we are constructed some systems in a quite different way in a situation when we have a crisis, for example, we have economical growth. And then legal, and then technological, and then organizational, and then psychological, and then, at last, but not least, political, you see. And of course, these components, I think, quite external, decrease a risk of failure, efficiency, effectiveness, flexibility, adaptivity, functionality, and the other components and things about which we are discussed yesterday. So I think that a good proof of such an attempt may be something what's a golden pyramid, you see. So here you still have time, cost, scope. And that's a former golden triangle, typical golden triangle, and so on. We could understand it because it's very simple. And with this triangle inside, with quality, you see. But over it, you have something what's a 5-parameter, user's requirements. It, of course, from a user perspective, it depends on many determinants of this process. It may be usefulness, efficiency, functionality, ergonomics, project risk degree, and many other parameters. It should be for, I think, analytic and designer think how it to say what user really want to have in the first position. Which parameter of this you see? So here you have something what say more than this golden triangle. And I think that's a very interesting thing. Now, I think that success of the project is not to obtain something like a balance between only cost, time, scope, and so on. So now we are inside of this on this internal pyramid here, constrained here by red lines, you see. And what does it mean? That our point of view of success of the informatics project may be constructed in such a way. The main purpose of IT implementation now is customer satisfaction. So customer, so this end user may be on the first position now. So what may remain the old joke? So how to understand of customer or end user? Probably you know that because in many places in internet you can observe it. You see here the main problem in the fact in these pictures here, a list of pictures, is not to joke, of course, but relations between analyst, designer, maybe a project manager, and final user. They don't understand each other. Consequences of this are obvious, you see. So compare the first picture and the last picture. So there are consequences of these misunderstandings, you see. And how to do this system according to final user requirements. How to understand final user. What should be the common language for analyst, designer, project manager, and so on, and the other side, and the final user. That's a problem, a real problem of information system constructing, you see. So that's a real problem, and I think that it isn't solved during years. So here you have, for a break, of course, only some statistics. I don't like statistics because we can interpret it in very many, ways. But here you have from one source. It's from Standish Group. From different reports, of course, because I try to make it in more or less the same manner, you see. But you can observe in the second column, in first you have years, and in the second you have something like a success coefficient. And in the third, failure coefficient. So you can observe that from 1994 till 2012, you have this success coefficient no more than 37%. But it is statistics. It is statistics. Of course, when I write the first time these statistics, so I could write that Standish Group's mission is to make more successful by showing ways to improve your IT project success rates and increase value of your IT investments through group reflection and wisdom of crowds. So you see, of course it's true, but for a better comparison, during 30 years almost, they don't change something like a method of assessment. So they are still in this golden triangle. So for them, success is to obtain a given combination or planned combination with cost, scope, and time. So if you fulfill it, you are very good. So that means success. But for final user, sometimes something like diminishing costs, or maybe, I don't know what, but if you have, for example, changing parameter of time, it's very good because we are realizing management information system before the end or final term, planned, of course. From point of view of Standish Group, it isn't success, it's failure. So I think that they try to change their methodology, I think, because it isn't very good to compare something what was maybe good in the 90s of the previous century and what's going on now, especially in the terms of changes or in methodologies, different methodologies of making some information system. I said previously about agile, you see, methodology, and the other phenomena in the market. But I like the research because they sometimes want to show something what's factors or components constraining project realization. And for example, here you have some of them from 2000 and 2010. So lack of involvement with business users' information from them. Incomplete business requirements and functional or change. Inexperienced project manager. So lack support of management company support. Lack of technological competence. Lack of resources for the project. Unrealistic expectation of the implementing team, or unclear defined requirements, or unrealistic project schedule, or a frequent and radical change in technology. So, of course, this list is very long, so here you have only 10 of them. And you can observe that it isn't important for project success, something what's technology, not only in the first place. Not methodology. It isn't important for the end user. The end user is important. And here you have 40% of typically human factors. So the first one, 1, 2, 3, third, fourth, and fourth from the end, you see. And it isn't changed, and if it is changed in the direction of these sociological or human factors in the effect. So it's important, and user still is important. What may be conclusions for this analysis, software analysis for management information system? So user perspective is ultimate and fundamental determinant of project management success. So you can observe it from these statistics, from my previous words. Quality assessment is a very good tool for user requirements research. So quality assessment of management information system may be main tool for success, for satisfaction of end user achievement. So satisfaction of end user means, as I said previously, something quite different than than balance in between these three coefficients. So obtaining in the real time and planned time the end of the project, and then in borders of the cost, and planned scope, functionality. Because functionality, especially functionality change, or view of the final users on the functionality change into realizing of information project, you see. I should go to something what's some method of management information quality assessment. So, of course, we have many kind of methods. Couple of them, you see. 1,000, I say here. So maybe user requirement specification, so some standards, you see. But standards you should very often modify to be useful, of course. Then inspection methods, for example. Then heuristic method. Remember name of Nielsen, for example. It's a very, very important person for this area of research. Quality function deployment. So benchmarking, for example, I like benchmarking. I say in a moment why. And for example, relationship methods, so EHP and POV Thomas Sati, you see. So I think that amongst the most popular are mentioned in many publications, such a method, a scoring method in very different forms, you see. And the taxonomy methods, or these EHP and P, Electre group methods, so Prometi group methods, so bipolar methods, and many others. So, in my opinion, the most popular and most used and most popular, especially amongst final users, are scoring methods, relational methods, and functional methods. So, here will be some practice. So, I'm starting to do such things about 2000, and they are used for very different things, for a different information system, because I'm starting from ERP systems, in fact, for electricity station, and then there are some methods for banking system, and there are some methods for different kind of organization, in fact. So it's difficult to say if it's comparable or no, but I could say that during these years I have some stages. First one was extensive. So only with application scoring methods. So there the studies were conducted in all most important branches, almost till 2007, you see. And there are such a method which will be easy to understand for final user mainly, so with benchmarking, scoring methods and so on. So I don't think about changing of this method, but my colleagues in university said, oh, Vitek is so simple, make something what's more complicated, what's more sophisticated. You are at university. So I tried to do it with SATI methods, you see, but it was complicated only for final user. To try to say final user, what does it mean, relation between, for example, two different features, two different, how to say, coefficients, for example, or two different, quite different, because one is technical, for example, and the second is economical, and how to measure in a scale, for example, in a Likert scale, is almost impossible. So you are going to final user, so talking to him by 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and after 3 hours, he or she said, oh, fulfill it yourself. So sometimes it's very difficult to use these complicated methods in questionnaires, you see. And I think the end user don't like something what's for him or her, something what's a complication of their life. So they like this simple method. But as I said, it should be research. I'm at university and so on. The next problem was comparing of the results of the method. Something here for comparing, you should make something like standardization between, it depends on the scale of evaluation, it depends on the branch, it depends on many determinants about which I will talking in a moment, you see. You could obtain quite different results. So the next phase, of course, was searching the best method for you see, examining of this problem. But you see, it's something like looking for Saint Graal. There are no one universal method of system quality assessment, I think. After these years of trying to finding something like would be complete, complex and universal solution, you see. Of course, I have some problems because I think that it's possible to make something like one set of criteria for all branches. It's impossible too. Final user taking into account in each branch quite different set of criteria, you see. And they don't want to discuss then maybe it should be in the other way set it or something like that. So here is the next problem very important. Of course, in this time I'm still in such a branch as internet banking because you see the next problem here each time is a source of data. When you have to do with internet websites, you see you have access to almost all of them if you are registered as a final user, you see. So it may be possible to make such an evaluation without going to the bank, without discussing with many bosses, and so on and so on. So here, of course, you see something like a procedure of the method, or obtaining of the results according to the different methods we have. So experts team, so analyze of set identified criteria, selected internet banks, calculating the basis for our individual judgments. So it's subjective, you see. Series of combination according to various methods website evaluation. It may be in the place of the expert, it may be, of course, final regular users of these websites, of course. But here is this condition of the simplicity of the method, you see, on the other hand. So next, perform comparative analysis of the results. So I said it's here should be some methods of standardization. So I'm taking into account three of them. The first one, scoring, group of scoring methods. The second one, relation methods. And the third one, I try to do something myself, you see. So I construct something what's in between scoring methods and relationship methods. So I call it something what's conversion methods. And when you are making this comparison for the same set of management information system, you could compare or evaluate methods of this assessment. So here you have something attempt to that for scoring, relationship methods and conversion methods. From such a point of view, from ease of application, from ease of acquisition, from ease of performing calculations, some objectivity, and findings interpretation, or rather ease of findings interpretation for the final user. And in scoring methods, here you have such things like ease of application. High, of course, because they are very easy for final user and for researcher too. Ease of acquisition, high, because you can make it, for example, in very simple method. So directly going face to face and talking with a user, or it's somewhere in internet and say, so here you have a link and fulfill it. And ease of performing calculation, high, because it's easy. And objectivity, low, I think, because it's subjective. But if you take, for example, something like a sample more than, say, 150, it may be objective. And findings interpretation is very high in this case, too, from point of view of final users, too, and they understand what you say to them. When you take into account this EHP method, for example, especially EHP, no ENP method, because it's too difficult for user at all. So ease of application is rather low, because you could to discuss with them what does it mean, relations between different, as I said, elements or components of the functionality of such a thing. Ease of acquisition is rather low, because you see, sometimes even when you, you think that you say to final user all things about this method, they don't understand still. So that's a problem. Ease of performing calculation, so it's of course high with appropriate software. You can do it yourself, of course, with a worksheet too, but it's more complicated. And objectivity here, they said it's high. And findings interpretation, medium. I say later. And the conversion method was in between, of course, with relationship methods and scoring methods, you see. And here, ease of application was very high. Ease of acquisition, I don't know, in effect. Ease of performing calculation, high with appropriate software. And objectivity, medium, and findings interpretation, medium, because here this method was supported by something what means average. So distance between average of observation and exact observation of each individual questionnaire. So here you have something like a comparison. But you can observe sometimes that, especially in EHP method, you could make something like experiment, change order of this criteria, and you obtain quite different results. Change order of criteria. So, for example, from first position to fourth position, and you will observe that you could obtain from end user quite different results. So they think that it is quite a different set of criteria, you see, and that's problem. because I'm not sure that it's objective or not, because it depends on the position of the criteria in the list of position. It isn't scientific, I think, in such a sense, you see. Okay, but generally, scoring method, regarded subjective despite applying a large number of criteria, and traditional linear scoring scale were evaluated by experts in a positive way as a rational evaluation method which is easy to acquire. That's a first. It's common sense. And after taking into consideration preference scale, experts claimed that in their view, impression, subjectivity, and equivalence of radically different criteria is not as significant as evaluation of academics suggests. So, it was my experience, of course. In experts' view, EHP method turned out more troublesome in a case of necessity to compare many websites or information systems by means of larger numbers of criteria, especially when I observe there are more than 10, for example. Declarative objectivity of this method was losing out with expert fatigue. Therefore, frequently websites were examined first were evaluated higher than subsequent web cities, you see. That's a problem too. Presented score is often regarded by experts as ambitious owing to the relatively extended Likert scale. So where consumption in this method was increasing in comparison with a scoring method exponentially in relation to the number of used evaluation criteria and the number of branch websites which were examined. We should consider question whether the benefits of the limited evaluation subjectivity are worthwhile taking into account increase of expert work consumption, you see. And additionally, for a conversion method, because it was combines advantages of scoring method and satis method, so it should be average, you see. So consisting in defining the relation of one criterion of reference to other criteria based on average distance from potential maximum value on the basis of regular scoring method is regarded as a reasonable compromise between this method, you see. And I think that many of the methods you could observe on the market now is of this class. And so we still don't know which method is the best from the user perspective, you see. Comparing, of course, of this group of methods too. But it depends on a goal of research the results for user, you see. So it's important. So from point of view of possible goals of application of management quality assessment, so for what we are making it. So for specification and accurate research, so into area in which the software works, for example, because we want to know something about system working in the branch. So something like a first glance on this system, you see. We don't know anything, you see, and we want to know something. And the second point is creating of ranking of IT solutions existing in the market. So we want to know which is the better. So best one. The choice of the best system here is important because it may be something like pattern for our operating on the financial market. Oh, yeah. And then, third point, identification of the features which make particular solution better than others, you see. So I tried to present it last year when, it may be, for example, optimization of features of designing on the system processes, you see, it may be the best pattern for making the best system in this area or something what would be the best system, of course. So how to choose the best method? The best method is not existing, I think. So there are many factors influencing the final results, of course, and they are independent from researcher even. So the one way of taking into consideration our experience and research intuition to apply a method which is more easier for verification. And I think that's really important. But you would try to build the tool so something would be repository of methods and mechanism of selection for evaluation of IMIs and try to use it. So let's do that. Here the basic aim of this operation would be analysis of possibilities of applying expert system mechanism, evaluation of websites from point of view of modeling requirements in this case. But you see, you can generalize this because it's only the first attempt. It's something like a concept of such a kind of system. So in order to realize this objective, which you see here, for example, so creation with model concept, so it maybe would be automatically choose website or miss, which would be the best from point of view of specific user, so end user in the fact, but in given branch, in given organization, in given institution, and even sometimes in given position. So this way of a system would help to find solution problems. So which of the functioning websites or miss demonstrates the greatest usefulness with regard to applied set of criteria, chosen criteria, but chosen by expert or by final user. Existing procedures, there are methods which are available on the present cannot provide us with univocal and universal answer to issue presented. So I said it previously, you see. A proposed model of the system may help to find desired solution, of course, but may help. What are determinants in the fact of such processes? So what would be modeling requirements, or factors or components of the system specification? So first of all, user category or end user category. So detailed objectives of each kind of user, so status which is to a large extent determines our further selection procedure in the fact. So it's the point, something like a starting point. Stop point, I don't know where it should be. I think that the most important is a set of criteria. But will be next. Sector, service branch, scope and accuracy of the study. A set of basic criteria group, specific criteria within each group, you see, because something like hierarchy sometimes is more important even than groups of criteria. What we could say more. So specific method, you see, addressing for the problem. From point of view of final user, it isn't in the first position, but in the fact it's important. Methods, environmental conditions. So quality of data, IT infrastructure, way of interpreting findings, you see. So I said it somewhere in between words, you see, until now, but now I try to define it. So user category. So I try to describe the real situation. Examined problem is being solved for the user, which decides what actually should be considered in the research. So it's mainly his or her point of view. An IT system designer has a different approach to the issues of websites' usefulness, functionality, because for them functionality is in the first place. Sometimes something like economical conditions by functionality is in the first place. End user pays greater attention to those evaluation criteria which are related to the ease of navigation, for example. So we said that it's technical. It's not only technical, environmental, and websites functionality which is close to a real one. So usefulness, you see. So and finally, economic aspects on which are connected with the content within the technical framework. Some years ago, I tried to construct something like a function of something what's exchanging what will be in technical functionalities, and you see economic criteria of the management information system assessment. It was very difficult and for verification especially. And it was very difficult, and I think that in the future I try to do it once more because results were unexpected, I think. A case of system designer where many technical aspects, so proper functioning, visualization, so aesthetics in such a sense. So those connected website security protection measures. We said about protection during the first day of our seminars here. Both points of view are important for the owner of this website. So here you have the third person which is involved in this process, owner of the website. We may observe a tendency to attaching slightly greater weight for client points of view. Now, especially now. The second, sector and service branch. So there are no one universe, as I said, because from user's point of view, in almost each branch, different criteria are important for them, you see. So from the point of view of this system design, would be recommended undertake constructive confrontation of a score obtained in the study of the established solution with properly perform analysis of user information needs. So I show you something like a method for solving it. Evaluation of websites, for example, is treated as an element of typical research carried out prior of the project, whether additionally author needs to take into consideration specific requirements of the mandator of the task. So the best or the greater differences are between something what's financial and technical, industrial management information system. The next point is scope and accuracy of the study. There are cases where a mandator is interested only in general and quickly formed opinion concerning the quality. So you are making it in a very quick way, so you can use only very simple method and very small set of criteria. It may be even a typical criteria for it. One of the methods used to limit the subjectivity is consulting a whole team of experts who represent homogeneous group. There's some specification, qualification you see. A group which are diversified with regards to their status of skills. But it's a longer process, I'm afraid. Next, set of criteria. So I think, as I said previously, that it is the most important point for this assessment of equality of each kind of management information system. So description of the criteria should be analyzed with regard to its meaning. Language of the analyzed designer programmer may be different from the language of a user. I said it previously, and that's a most important point. And then specific method of addressing of the problem, you see. So commonly applied ranking method, so you see, which is easy to use and simple due to its interpretation. That's important in the relation to the end user, I think. So I show you something like a comparison in between implementation of this method. The next problem is a relation between elements. So here, the most important is to constructing something what we could say that is model, conceptual model or something like that. So as it has become apparent above specification, so creating of each IT system that would be support decision-making process in examined case, it's not an easy task. Many problems, you see, many questions and so on. Due to the quantity of data increasing exponentially, which together with a mutual relation should be proceeded by the system. So simultaneously the specification which has been constructed in the second part allows for analyzing the problem and presenting it in a form of an orderly model research procedure. Also, we should remember that in a given case we used a limited specified amount of gathered information, also a number of methods which may be potentially used in process data increases. So I think that would be wise to make such a system with analyzer, simulator, solver, interpreter and verifier. And in the end, what does it mean for each construction? So the first one, analyzer. I have a time for it? 10 minutes? Okay, sorry. So the first, analyzer. So here you have a whole concept So something like a really logical framework structure for expert systems supporting this problem. And first of all, you have a user and analyzer. So query language, selection mechanism, status, sector branch, so you can choose in between them. So for what we have something like a module of analyzer. So basic task mainly consists in allowing a user to communicate with a system. Complex task because it should be made of a few subsequent steps, you see. A first step, user should have a chance to ask a question which with one hand would express intentions and the other it could serve as a basis for initiating further actions, you'll see. In order to address the first problem, you should deal with issue corrections of categories and correspondence with categories known to the user, you see, so for common language, as I said previously. It happens when treatment of the same variables from the point of view of a user and system designer may be entirely different, so here is one of the most problems. Next, we should construct mechanism which helps to specify scope of the research either by means subsequent questions or selecting available options from the menu. The first stage, we should ensure internal consistency and integrity of the questions that are being asked, you see, from point of view of limitations which result from previous selection. So you have step by step go to the end. Analyzer, we aid with making a choice of a category of user branch where he or she wants to operate, scope of action, and so on. Should be supplied with database information concerning status of user, division into sectors, branches, of course, a list of experts, and set of criteria groups and specific criteria in something like hierarchy manner, you see. The next part is simulator, so generating preliminary tables, presenting tables to the expert, selection of the methods to be applied, supplying data with parameters, and data treatments. So connecting with many other things you see here, and I said about it in the end. So what simulator? Will be used to gather basic data for performing calculations. The role consists in generating tables in which would enable an expert website users and so on, evaluate their phenomena, and subsequently expert would be able to sum evaluation and calculate additional indicators which are required for further analysis. So for example, when I am starting with comparing of a different kind of ERP system we are making with our colleagues from Silesian Technical University, something like a tables inside of which we have more than 3,300 types of criteria, you see. It's enormous big, you see, so it's very difficult. So if we have here something like supporting by the system, it will be easier. Selection of a specific method used to solve a research problem. Mechanism of supplying some methods with additional parameters, you see. A mechanism of processing data in case of selecting general solutions with access to required statistical packages, you see. So there are many technical problems here around it till now. And three next parts such as verifier, solver, and interpreter. Solver module, so name say what is going on. So should be used additional supplementary calculation backend of the design system. It may be business intelligence, it may be something like a package, and so on. Interpreter module may be designed to realize two objectives. Firstly, may be helpful for interpretation of this course, if we have such a tool and if we need such a tool, especially in sophisticated method. And the representation, graphical presentation. And its second objective is comparison of result obtained by means of various methods if we want to make such a comparison, of course. And then verifier should become an additional module. Its primary task is verifying the correctness of methods used to solve specified problems of the user and coordination of system operations. So here you have in the effect a system as a whole. There are some main modules and some additional tools for it. But what about presented system? So concept is still being developed, of course. I sent it to some universities, you see, and some of them use it for their further works. For example, at Szczecin University, Professor Budziński makes something like a mechanism for multi-criteria optimization. So user choose, for example, 3 methods, and this optimizer makes something like a Pareto optimal point for results from these 3 methods. So some people make something like additional users function for next stage of evaluating of the system from point of view of, I don't know, environment, ergonomics or something like that. So on the basis of a concept, after its specification, we can create logical projects. So they made in this way something like logical, but not only logical, but technical project too. And they are using something like this concept for their real purposes, you see. Probably the best for the concept will be constructing of a supporting tool. So main problem, how to define library of patterns. So here we could gather something like cases, different cases, but what does it mean pattern? It's a problem real. So importance idea for open modeling here and user. It may be, this idea may be used here, so we have to do with open modeling. We discussed about it yesterday. And importance for designers, so possibility of experiments with different forms of model for many kinds of user. Possibility of approximation used as models for user requirement, etc. I see. So of course you see we could fulfill it with cases. About some cases I try to show you during our last conferences, during different international conferences in Poland too. One of them I show you or try to show you yesterday, you see. But as I said, basis for pattern constructions, so it's for knowledge expert system, where such cases as I too presented. So I think that it isn't one and the last problem which we have in this area. And I think when we have any occasion to meet in the future, so I could say you more in this field. So thank you very much for your attention, and that's all.
Thank you, Witold, for presenting very interesting issues. We have time for one question. Can?
So I think that we are in something what means very well, continuously. Continuous development of this method, you see, because in each case, I suppose, we are trying to use new methods, new cases. So as I said yesterday, so we constructed something like a module for mobile phenomenon. And I think that for this, we can construct something like a part of that. And I don't know when. So it's in progress. Yeah.
Ladies and ladies and gentlemen, I have some information about dinner and about trip to Krakow. The dinner is the restaurant that is in the beautiful park in Katowice, and we can go together to the restaurant. I propose that we will can meet at 6 o'clock p.m. and we will come together to the bus tram and next and then by tram to the restaurant. And tomorrow we will leave 8 o'clock. 8 o'clock. The bus will be opposite to Novotel, and we will meet outside the hotel.
Okay, and we construct expert
Thank
system
you.
how to go to this place.